Hello, hello. Here I want to go in a video quickly over the couple of notes that I wrote, and this is more also as a reference that you can use while writing to just kind of like check and maybe it helps. And then what I'll do is go over a few emails, like a whole sequence of emails that I wrote myself for another product, and I'll just point out a couple of the things that we've spoken about, so that way it'll probably be really quick. Let me go over these things real quick. The first thing is that always want to write as if you're writing to a friend, right? So you're not writing as a marketer to 1,000 people. You're writing like to your best friend who is sitting somewhere else, and you're just writing to them, and that's kind of like the style that we want to use. So we're also not gonna put in like tons of logos and branding and images and all of that. We're just gonna keep it like really really simple. Second thing is about the length, because we spoke about that. So I would say 500 to 1,000 words, something like that. That's roughly what you would strive for. But it's more important to be entertaining and to tell your story in a good way than to be super obsessed about the length. Another thing that we spoke about is this idea of like open loops, right? So that's these cliffhangers, and I'll show you in a second like a couple of examples. So I think that will be clear. And there's a few more things. It's good to cater to the best prospects rather than try to please everyone. So the nature of email marketing is that half the people are just not going to open it, or more than half, right? 70% are maybe not going to open it. So that's completely fine. And that's not something to worry about. That just means that that's good to know, right? So you should always write to people that are curious and that are basically that want to learn more basically. So they're still in a hurry, but they're interested. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading at all. Few technical things that I'll also point out in a second. What you definitely want to do is use short sentences and use lots of white space. So that makes it easier for people to read. So you should basically write to like kind of like this dyslexic like sixth grader, right? Someone that has like a really hard time reading anything and will be completely intimidated by a massive block of text. So you want to really see how you can break it up in a visual way that people think like, oh, okay, I can do this, kind of. So that's that's actually really important to take in mind. And it doesn't need to be like we're not like a bunch of English teachers that's gonna be like all anal about it. So it just needs to be easy flowing, and that's more important than being like technically correct or anything like that. So yeah, that doesn't really matter. Um, and a really big thing is that what we want to do is that in email it's really hard to share a lot of information with people. So rather than sharing a lot of information, what we want to do is like take one main insight that you want to share with them and then package that insight up into a story. So for instance, if you have this email, this third email I think, where we talk about, we've spoken about life change and we want them to come to Bali, right? So basically the insight is going to be, if you want life change, then it's unlikely that it's going to happen if you stay in the same old boring environment that you're in right now. So if you want to break through the routine, it's a better idea to go somewhere else where there's different inputs, different kind of things, and then you can actually make a change. So that could be the kind of like main insight of email 3. And then what we're going to do is take that main insight and see, okay, how can we tell a little story that basically has this insight as the moral of the story, right? So that people would take that away, packaged in a story. Yeah, and then two more kind of like a little bit technical things. If you want to shorten things up, it's always a good idea to check if you can remove the first and second alinea. So the alinea is actually a Dutch word, I guess. Paragraph. So the first and second paragraph, because often what you do is when you start writing, you kind of like have this little warm up to get into the story, right? So often you can actually just cut that out and then you just jump straight into the action with people, and that kind of like makes it more snappy and more to the point. And last thing is, and this may be the most important thing of all, I would focus on telling the story rather than being like super concerned about like the technical parts of like how you write it and how you structure your sentences and stuff like that. All this technical part is like really really easy. I wouldn't really worry too much about that. The main thing is that you tell the story in a way that is fun and that is easy for people to grasp. Last things is about like reluctant hero. We've spoken about that, like the Frodo kind of Lord of the Rings. And if you want to add to that, and I'll point that out in the examples in a second, if you want the story to be more emotional, the way that you create emotions is through making obstacles for Amanda in this case, because she's like the hero, right? So the way that you make something like relatable and interesting and all of that is by adding like extra obstacles that she needs to, you know, overcome. So it's like she's kind of like sick of her job, and she's also in debt, and her grandpa just died, and the house burned down, and like everything is going to shit. And that's what builds emotion more than like how you write it or anything like that. And the last thing, this is just a few pointers for like further reading if you're like curious. There's some more things, as I would say totally optional, but those things could be helpful. This is a really good storytelling guy, and these two guys are like more about copywriting and like salesmanship basically. Okay, that's the basics. If you follow this link, take you to this document, and this is like a whole sequence of emails that people get for completely different product that I sell. So what people do is they also come mostly through Facebook, for instance, and they sign up for this 14-day email course. And as you can see, it's like, well, it's like 14 days, 15 actually, and they get an email every day. And I just want to point out a couple of different things that I do that maybe can be helpful to you also. So first thing is like definitely you want to think about when you write about the headline, right? So that's just an important thing to take into account, that you actually need to think about that. What I do here is just in the headline say that it's Growthcast, so that's what they signed up for, so they'll recognize that, and then kind of use that sort of consistently, and also say that it's like, you know, part of a bigger whole, so people know kind of like what to expect. Then here, this is kind of like a pre-PS or something like that. So I just remind people this is what you signed up for, and you know, if you have some technical things or anything like that, you can kind of put that here, and a lot of people read that, and it's kind of like separate from the main story. Now the first thing that I'm telling in this email is actually very similar to what I suggested for the Amanda story. So this is a story of me basically that I was working on a different company, and at some point I decided that I wanted to do something differently, etc., etc. And this is very much the reluctant hero story. So let me tell you how I got here. You'll see why in a sec. So that's actually open loop here, right? So that's already kind of like a little like hook of why you should actually keep reading. I'm just a normal guy from a town you've never heard of. I actually grew up in a small town in Holland, blah, 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 blah. So that's very much putting myself into a more relatable kind of position, right? I'm not like this superhero kind of guy, but I'm the reluctant hero. I just grew up in like a really small town in Holland, that's actually true, and that's kind of like how I got started. And basically, I dropped out of university because like I wanted basically to start a company together with a friend of mine, and he'd been to San Francisco and like seeing how everyone's getting like filthy rich making these startups, and that completely failed. Basically, it didn't work out. So here I'm kind of piling up the obstacles, right? So that's like one obstacle, and then another thing is that I lost some money in that, and like everything was kind of like going to shit, etc., etc., etc. I'll kind of like skip through things here, and then at some point there was a point where it's kind of like the rock bottom kind of point, right? I had like no more business, no degree, no revenue, no way of realistically getting a normal job, and then I stumbled upon something, and that was kind of like the seed that would make a change. And there was like there was actually like a kind of like an article, I guess, that I wrote, and it's like growth solves all problems. So that's basically a completely different market, but there's something that kind of like triggered me. And in your case, it could be that something related to yoga that triggered you, or anything like that, or it could be the story with the cat, and that you wrote down the only thing, 3 things that I like is actually my cat and the meditation and the yoga, right? So something like that, which is kind of like this sliver of like little idea, little nugget that you can hold on to that will bring this change. Now, I was completely unqualified, blah, 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 further just positioning myself as this like reluctant guy. And then here's actually the hook. So all in all, it seems really intimidating to learn that. And I decided that I would give it a try. Now, fast forward. Now, despite all my shortcomings, how did I fare? Well, actually, it worked out really well. So what I did actually turned out working out really well. And in my case, that's like in a financial kind of positioning, because that's what this market likes. So I would definitely not do that here for the yoga, but you could do a similar kind of hook, right? So this is how all up till here is like, this is like old life, and then fast forward. Now, 11 months later, things were like fantastic, right? Now, how did that happen? That's of course basically the cliffhanger, right? How did that happen? Well, that's a story of its own, and tomorrow I'll tell you how that happened, to be continued tomorrow. So that's basically how you set up a hook. This is a very like obvious kind of hook, right? This is like almost overdone, I guess. And for now, I want to give you a quick recap of the itinerary of what you're going to get in the next couple of days. So this is basically smaller hooks where I tell them like, this is what you're going to get. So I would definitely suggest that you follow a similar kind of structure in your first email here. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go through all these emails. Obviously, you can do that yourself. Set a hook where like all these different things, and the main thing what most people sign up for when they sign up for this email course is actually that they want to know how to drive more traffic and more, warm leads for their business, right? So that's the first lesson, which is tomorrow, right? So that's another hook. So it's like all over the place here. So there's like, this is one massive hook, then here's like smaller ones, and then here's another massive one, same place, same time, blah, blah, blah. This is actually a really good idea to add your picture so people can relate to you. Just do like a shot so they can kind of see your face. And what I do here is add like a PS, and in the PS you can kind of tell a little bit of a separate story, right? So actually, I use it in this case as even another hook, right? So, the number one job of a growth marketer is blah, blah, blah. And it's also a way for people to kind of like respond to me. So that way you can build a conversation with people. Okay, so that's like very in-depth about this first email. What I want to do here is take like, let's see, maybe second one, actually not the best idea. So what I do actually in the third email, I fulfill my open loop, right? So I fulfill the story of like how things kind of changed, etc., etc. And what I do in my case is that there's also like these lessons with like basically insights that people learn. It's like on day 2 and 4 and 6 and 8. So it's like on those days there's like more of like a lesson, and I want to show you this one for instance. So this is a lesson about copywriting actually, and I just want to show you how you can use a little story to package a certain insight, right? So this is a little story. I was drinking with 2 friends of mine, and I was telling about like how some things like kind of like came to be, and then Casper is a friend of mine who's kind of like intrigued, blah, 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 and he asked the question, if you could pick only one skill to be absolutely like great at, what would it be? And that way I can kind of use this intro of a little story to basically answer this question, right? So this question is basically sets up the rest of the thing, and the insight is that it's like copywriting is basically by far the most profitable skill to learn and to be really good at if you want to do the kind of shit that I do. So that's it really. So the whole email, the insight from the email is just that. One more thing that's maybe good to point out, what I try to do often with these headlines is to use the headlines in a way where they kind of tell the story in a way in a digested form, right? So if you could only pick an absolute skill to be absolutely killer at, what would it be? And then the next headline is copywriting, right? So that's what the answer is basically. And then here you have like tell me more. So that's another thing where it can like help people just move through this kind of thing. Tell me more. It's just incredible what happens. Like all kind of things get better, obviously. And copywriting is a skill that hardly changes over time. So the stuff that was relevant in the 1930s still works today. It's all human psychology. So that's basically the main things, I guess, that I would like to share. I hope it gives you a little bit of an idea how you could structure these emails. This is my personal style. I know that people like this style, but that's a different market, different kind of thing. So it's like hard to compare. And I would definitely say find your own kind of style. But I hope that just giving these emails might help you get up to speed faster. Yeah, that's it really. There's not that much more to it. I'll leave it to that. If you have more questions, then let me know. And obviously, I'll be happy to to just review stuff and help you if you get stuck and all of that. But that's kind of obvious. Okay, I'll leave it to that, and we'll be in touch.